A new poll commissioned by Summit Ministries on religious freedom found American support for religious freedom is overwhelming and it is bipartisan. Yet Democrats in Congress are pushing measures like the Equality Act that would require churches and faith-based organizations to hire people who oppose their religious beliefs, as well as undermining religious freedom in speech, business, and other areas of life. Do these findings spell trouble for the Democratic agenda in Congress? Well, here to talk about it, Dr. Jeff Myers, president of Summit Ministries. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tony. Great to see you.
So this is pretty strong. 82% of Americans say freedom of religion is important to a healthy American society.
It's 82% of people overall, but what's amazing is it's 79% of Democrats who say that religious freedom is essential to a good society. There is no debate on this. In fact, only 9% of people think that religious freedom is not a good idea. Tony, as I said on a news show a couple of days ago, there are more people who think they've been visited by aliens than who think that religious freedom is not important. And yet Congress continues to push ahead with diminishing it whenever they have the opportunity.
Well, the findings of this, and you specifically ask about whether or not an organization should be forced to hire people that believe differently than them. What were the numbers on that?
Well, the numbers were that 50% of people say they oppose charities, faith-based organizations from being required to hire somebody who opposes their beliefs. And as you mentioned in the introduction, that's a key component of the Equality Act that is going to be before the Senate here before very long. It essentially says that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which was a bipartisan act passed in 1993, Ted Kennedy pushed it through the Senate, Chuck Schumer pushed it through the House, and Bill Clinton signed it. So there was no disagreement that religious freedom is important. It specifically says in the Equality Act that religious freedom is not a defense if anything you are doing can be perceived as hurting people who perceive themselves to be transgender specifically.
So only 20% of Americans believe that churches and faith-based organizations should be required to hire people who oppose their religious beliefs. I mean, that stands in direct contrast to the Equality Act and what the Democratic Party is pushing.
It is in direct contrast to it. Now, 30% of Americans aren't sure. So, Tony, we still have our work cut out for us in educating the public about this. But that should be good news. Americans are not interested in forcing churches and charities to do things that they don't want to do. And that's why it's so significant, the case that you've been talking about that just came down from the Supreme Court in Philadelphia. Americans are on the side of the Supreme Court, and that was a 9-0 decision. This should be a warning shot across the bow to radicals in Congress who are trying to push a leftist agenda on this question.
So, Dr. Jeff Myers, any surprises for you in this poll that you commissioned?
You know, I think probably the biggest surprise is how many people aren't familiar with these issues. It seems like as much as this gets talked about in the news media, people should be better informed maybe and have a better sense of what's going on. But again, Americans are not the kind of people who think that politics is at the center of everything. They want to be able to live their lives. They want to have freedom. They hope that their leaders will do well for them. But I think that was probably the biggest surprise. So continuing to inform people, let our neighbors know, talk about religious freedom. That is the first freedom. It is the first freedom mentioned in the First Amendment to the Constitution. I think that we just continue to have our work cut out for us in informing people of how the Constitution is important.
Yeah, I don't think the media is talking about it as much as they used to, especially when it is in conflict with the LGBTQ priorities. And I think there's been a silencing in the secular media for sure. Christian media still talks about this, but I think that's why you have such a large percentage that's undecided or unsure, because there's not been a healthy discussion about this.
There hasn't, and what we refer to as the LGBTQ agenda has placed itself on the railroad tracks right in front of the train of the constitutional protection of the freedom of religion. And so there will be a collision at some point, and their hope is to derail that train, to diminish the significance of the Constitution, And I'm not sure that I think you make a great point. I'm not sure the media is really prepared to talk about that. But Americans will eventually, these are two agendas that are standing against one another at this point. And unfortunately, it does not look right now like there is any kind of a good way forward other than just to protect the Constitution. And
well, Jeff, I appreciate you joining us today. As always, great to talk with you. Appreciate the great work you do at Summit Ministries. And thanks for sharing this information with us here today on Washington Watch.
Thank you, Tony.